So this is the SKYWAVE F40 by Ultimia. This is a soundbar. So normally I don't do soundbars on the channel, and to be quite honest, whenever they reached out to me a few weeks ago and asked me if I would be interested in reviewing a couple of their soundbars, I initially said no, but you know, they kept at it. They tried to convince me that this is a good product. So I said, you know what? I don't typically do soundbars on the channel, but why don't I do something that is a little bit more common for people? So I said, you know what, I'll give it a try. And again, honestly, I wasn't expecting much. When I took it out of the box and I put it together and I saw how small it was, I didn't have much faith until I hooked it up. I was very surprised, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. So this is their SKYWAVE F40 soundbar. So this is a Dolby Atmos soundbar, and it's quite impressive for what it is. Now, initially I was going to do the review out here in my living room, but as you can see, I have some pretty big speakers for a very specific reason. I have an open floor plan, and this is, I wouldn't say it's massive, but it's big enough to where I need very big speakers. I need a receiver. I need something like JTR 210 HTs to fill this room with space, or to fill this space with, you know, sound. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna hook this up in my bedroom because, I mean, honestly, if you do look at the size of it, it's not massive. I don't expect this to fill the room with sound. I think it will really struggle. It does come with some speakers, surround speakers, and a subwoofer. Again, this is a very small, minimal setup, so I figured, why don't I set this up in my bedroom? That's gonna be a lot more, that's gonna be more fair. And it didn't disappoint. And actually, when I first turned this on, this thing overpowered my room. When you turn it on, I believe it's, the volume is at like level 50. I had to crank it down pretty much to about 15 to 20 to where it was tolerable. So yeah, you have two speakers on the front. So I'll flip that so you can see it. So you've got your two speakers on the front, you've got your power, you've got your source, you've got Bluetooth, so you can Bluetooth to this, and then you have your volume controls. And I believe there may even be some speakers on the front. Yeah, so there's some speakers on the front. You probably won't be able to see it, but there are some speakers on the front. And then on the back, you have your power, you have your subwoofer connector, you have a USB, you have your optical, and then you have your HDMI. So this only has one HDMI, but it is eARC. So I do have this hooked up to my 65-inch TV, my Hisense 65-inch TV, which does support eARC, and it works great. You plug in the HDMI from your eARC to your TV to the HDMI on here. When you turn on the TV, the soundbar turns on. When you control the volume, you see the controls on the TV, which the TV is not controlling the volume, but the controls on the TV and on this. So, you know, I'm using a universal remote. So it's basically, you know, it's an all-in-one setup. So you really don't have to do too much. You plug in the subwoofer, you plug up the speakers, which are wireless, and then you plug in the soundbar, and you're pretty much good to go. It is a super, super simple setup. So we have the soundbar here, and then we have two speakers. So these are the surround speakers. So you've got your speaker here, and then on the back, you've got mounting so that you can mount this on the wall. And it does come with some mounting brackets if you want to do that. You've got a button that you use to pair it. I didn't have to do that. As soon as I turned it on, it just automatically connected. But if you have to pair it, you would use that. And then it tells you RRS, right rear surround. And then on the bottom, you've got your DC in, and you've got the cable that connects to the other surround speaker. So what's interesting about these is there's a long cable that connects the left surround and the right surround. So they're not truly wireless, but the wire connects the two surround speakers, and then the two speakers connect wirelessly to the sound bar. So, you know, depending on if you're somebody that wants to have a secure connection between the two surround speakers, you do have that, but then you also have the speakers connecting wirelessly to the soundbar. And then let me show you the subwoofer. So this is the subwoofer. I don't remember the size of this. I'll put it up on the screen. But this is the subwoofer. It is wired, so you have the wire connection that plugs into the soundbar. And then you have a port on the back. So this is ported. So that's the subwoofer. And then you have your remote. So you have your remote here. And rather than just go through all the stuff that's on the remote, I'm actually going to show you the app, because there is an app that you can Bluetooth and it's pretty intuitive. So this is the app. You'll download the application. It's Ultimia. And then once you turn on the soundbar, it should automatically find it. If you have issues, I would make sure that you turn off the soundbar first. Open the app. It's going to ask you to add a soundbar. Turn on the soundbar, and then it automatically finds it. So this is what the app looks like. So this is the SKYWAVE F40. So you've got your volume controls here. You've got the power button. You can change the source from eARC, optical, Bluetooth, or USB. And then you have your equalizer, which is very, like I said, this is very intuitive. You don't get this on many, sub 300 soundbar systems. So you've got your equalizer here. So you've got your bass, your mid-range, and the treble. You can change all the stuff there. You can save it. You can change the levels on the surrounds, up firing. So again, this is a Dolby Atmos system soundbar, so there are up firing speakers. And then you can turn on or turn off the up mix. But then you also have, so you can save it. I'm gonna hit cancel. So if you click over to style, you can go over here and you can kind of play around with this. So if you want to have more of a rock setup, if you're listening to music, if you're listening to classical or pop, and then you can adjust the bass there. And then of course you've got your surround, up firing, up mix. I'm going to hit reset so that goes back to normal. And then you also have your movie preset. So if you hit default, you have your presets. You have your movie, music, voice, night, game, and sport. And then you can individually control the bass, the mid-range, and the treble. And then of course you can customize your surrounds, your up firing, and you can turn on or off the mixer. Okay, let's talk about how this sounds. So in my bedroom, I typically 95% watch YouTube. When I'm laying in bed before I go to bed, or if I'm just, chilling in the room, doing something in my room, I typically watch YouTube. Occasionally I will watch some streaming, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, maybe a little PLEX. And this sounds pretty good. Again, I'm glad that I set it up in my bedroom and not the living room. I think that this system would probably really struggle just because the drivers are so small. It's not a massive soundbar. Before, the last soundbar that I had was a Nakamichi Shockwave, and I even had that set up in my bedroom. I actually just packed it up so that I could use this. So I reviewed that out here in the living room, and then I put it in my bedroom. I was using that. That was just overkill for my bedroom. Just way too powerful. But I think something like this is perfect for a bedroom setup or a small room setup. Maybe if you have like a kid's room, or maybe a small media room that's not overly large, or your typical bedroom, I think this is really going to excel. And like I said, this actually, when I first turned it on and I set it up, it turned on at about 50 level, and it basically overpowered my room. There was a ton of bass. The vocals are super clear. I did watch some movies. I watched some PLEX. I watched some scenes from Ready Player One, watched some scenes from Dune Part 2, and then I watched some scenes from Godzilla -1. Now I will say that for the most part, this did a phenomenal job in my bedroom, considering the environment. Now the bass struggled a little bit on some of those movies, but you're talking, Dune Part 2, Godzilla -1, Ready Player One, those things, the soundtrack on that, the bass is probably going 20 hertz or even below. I'm not expecting that subwoofer to go down that low. So, you know, just keep that in mind. If you're going to be using this to watch blockbuster movies, the sub is going to struggle with that. I mean, they're small drivers. That you saw the size of the sub. I don't expect that to be able to reproduce, you know, 20 hertz. So, and I think most people are reasonable with that. Dolby Atmos effects, hit or miss. There were times where I did hear actual height effects, and then there were other times where I was like, you know, I know there's supposed to be some effects there, but I didn't really hear it. But again, I'm in my bedroom, so, you know, there's stuff everywhere. But for the most part, I'm very happy with this. You know, after I reviewed it, I was wondering what I was going to do with it. You know, do I want to keep it? I'm actually going to keep it. I actually think that this is perfect for my bedroom. Again, I mainly watch YouTube. I do watch some streaming content in there. So I'm not looking for something that's going to knock my socks off, that's going to, you know, destroy my room. I just want something where I can hear the vocals, and occasionally when I watch some streaming or do some, you know, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, you know, I've got the surrounds, and I'm going to get the most out of the system for what it is, considering my environment. So yeah, this is my first foray into Ultimia. I believe I'm saying that right. And they make some pretty good products. So I don't think they make like these massive soundbars like your Nakamichi Dragons, your Sonos Arc. But for something that's minimal, if you want something that's cheap as far as price, I think these are very, very reasonable. I'll put the price up on the screen for this. These are very reasonable products that do very well for the environment and for what they do. So I'll leave some links in the description if you guys want to check this out. Ultimia SKYWAVE F40. Very impressed. This is a keeper. I'm going to keep this in my bedroom. So thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.